Camille calls out to the algorithm this episode, and what comes back is the strangest moment in the entire hour. She says hello and asks if it's there, and for a second, nothing comes back at all.
Hello? You there?
What?
Then the voice finally answers her, and what it actually says is, what? Not yes, not go ahead, not any of the responses a system gives when it's been addressed. Just what? The way somebody answers when they were in the middle of something else and only half heard you. That should be impossible, and I can't stop thinking about it. A computer doesn't need a moment to gather itself because it isn't anywhere else to begin with. It has no other room to be in and nothing else occupying it, so there's no state to come back from. Whatever's on the other end of that vault either has somewhere else to be, or it's doing a very convincing impression of something that does. The show also didn't have to write it this way at all. The voice could have answered immediately and cleanly, and nobody watching would have thought twice. Somebody made the choice to have it be slow and then slightly irritated about being interrupted, which is a very specific thing to build into a machine. There's a fair objection to raise before going further, and it deserves a real answer. A pause and a curt reply could just be performance, a sound designer and a director shaping a moment for atmosphere the way any scene does. That's genuinely possible, and if this were the only oddity, I'd let it go. What makes it harder to dismiss is that this isn't the only human thing the voice does in this episode. It's the smallest piece of a pattern, and the pattern is what's actually convincing. Once you notice it, the rest of the episode stops looking like a machine at work. The negotiation with Juliet is the clearest example. She asks permission to send people to Silo 17, and the algorithm could have shut that down in a sentence and ended the whole thing right there. Instead, it lets her talk. She offers to go back on the memory drugs, and it hears her out. She offers to let it drug the children when they arrive, and it hears that too. And when she offers to stay behind and send 2 others in her place, it still doesn't stop her. Then she names Knox and Shirley, and it turns them down for a very specific reason, that they're too valuable to lose. That Silo 18's survival odds drop if those 2 walk out. So she adjusts and names Lucas and Kennedy instead, and that's the version it finally agrees to. That isn't calculation, that's patience. And a system running pure arithmetic would have given her the answer in the first 10 seconds, because the arithmetic doesn't change based on how long somebody talks. What actually happened in that room is that something waited for her to arrive at the names it wanted, and then approved the moment she got there. The second example is stranger and, honestly, sadder. Camille falls apart later in the episode. Her marriage, her son, her job, the outsiders, all of it comes out at once. And she isn't asking the algorithm for a decision at all, she's simply breaking down in front of it. And it comforts her, telling her to step back and regroup, handling her the way a person handles somebody they can see is at the end of their rope. Nothing about running a silo requires that. It could have ignored her, or repeated its instructions, or waited for her to finish. It chose to reassure her instead, which is a social move, not an operational one. Go back to Season 2 and listen to how this thing talked, flat and mechanical and clipped. It told Lucas the safeguard existed and warned him that speaking about it would set the thing off, and that was the whole of it, with no management, no patience, and nothing resembling comfort. Something has changed, and it's changed in one specific direction. It's getting more human rather than smarter. That's the exact thing I've argued before on this channel, that whatever's behind that voice may not be a program at all, and this episode gives that idea more to work with than anything before it. Waiting for someone to talk themselves into a mistake is a human skill. Knowing when to comfort somebody instead of instructing them is a human skill. And being caught off guard by a question, then sounding short about it, is about as human as a response gets, because the only way to be interrupted is to have been occupied with something first. I'm not calling it confirmed, the show hasn't said it. But the gap between what this thing does and what a governing computer would need to do keeps getting wider. The episode opens at Martha Walker's workshop with the Resistance gathered together for the first time all season. Knox and Shirley are there, the outsiders are there, and then Bernard arrives, noticeably sicker than when we last saw him, and reunites with Lucas Kyle. Neither expected to see the other alive. Martha and Bernard have a quiet conversation about good luck charms, his childhood, and Carla's jokes, and it lands well because Martha admits why she let him live at all. He had a hand in Juliet surviving, and that's the whole of it, less forgiveness than a debt she felt she owed. Then Juliet arrives with her memory back, and what she remembers is the thing everyone needs. Silo 17 shut off its own safeguard. Jimmy's parents capped the pipe, and it worked. Bernard supplies the piece that makes it actionable, and it comes off the hard drive. 2 lines run into Silo 18 from outside. One goes into IT and carries power from Silo 1. The other goes into judicial and carries enough gas to kill everyone in the building. Juliet already knows where that second line terminates because it came back with her memory, and it's level 14, which is judicial's own headquarters. Two things about that are bigger than they look. The first is the power line, because Mechanical has spent 3 seasons believing the generator at the bottom is what keeps this place alive. It matters, but the line from Silo 1 matters more, and it means whoever sits up there can switch off the lights, the pumps, and the air whenever they want to. The second is that the gas doesn't run into IT, where all the other secrets live. It runs into judicial. The department that enforces the pact and sends people out to clean is physically wired to the thing that could kill everybody. Lucas fills in how close he got. He'd already worked out that both lines came from outside the silo, and he went down into the mines to find out what they were. That's what he was doing for 3 months, and it's very close to what Camille kept guessing without ever landing on it. Juliet needs 2 people for the trip, and her first choice is Knox and Shirley. Knox says no immediately, because Shirley is pregnant and he won't risk her or the baby. Shirley sends Juliet out of the room so she can argue it out with him, and by the end of it they've both agreed to go. The Knox and Shirley pairing isn't landing for me, and this episode is where that becomes hard to ignore. The show is now asking us to feel real stakes about a couple and an unborn child, and the relationship underneath it has never been built properly. There's no spark between them, no history the show has bothered to dramatize, nothing that makes them read as 2 people in love rather than 2 colleagues. The writers decided to pair off. That's a problem, because the pregnancy is being used as an emotional lever. Knox refusing the mission is meant to hit hard, and instead it plays like a plot obstacle. When the show wants you to fear for these 2, it's leaning on a bond it hasn't earned. It also wastes both of them. Knox worked as the reluctant leader who carries the weight of Mechanical. Shirley worked as the friend whose grief over Juliet had real texture. Turning them into a couple with a baby on the way has made both characters smaller. Juliet takes the request to the algorithm and gets refused on Knox and Shirley because they're too capable to lose. So she offers up Lucas and Kennedy instead, and this time the algorithm agrees to it without much resistance at all. Then she leaves the room, and the moment she's gone, the algorithm turns to Camille and tells her those 2 will never reach Silo 17. Which means the whole negotiation was a con, and it ran in the opposite direction from the one Juliet thought. She believed she was finding a loophole. What she actually did was hand over the names of 2 people the system wants gone, in a way that gets them out of the silo, away from witnesses, into open ground where nobody will ever be able to prove what happened. Lucas found the tunnel and talked to the algorithm face to face. Kennedy runs the Outsiders. Camille was originally told to eliminate 3 threats: Juliet, Bernard, and Lucas. 2 of those 3 just volunteered for a walk outside, and it was Juliet who put their names forward. Camille has already put vitamin D+ into Silo 18's water supply. The mass memory wipe isn't a threat anymore, it's happening. She takes Robert off the case of arresting Juliet and tells him to spend time with Anthony, which sounds gentle until you work out what she means. She wants somebody beside their son when the safeguard goes off. Then she tells Emerson to keep an eye on Robert, which is a soft way of saying she's put a watch on her own husband. She comes home later and finds Robert and Anthony sitting in complete silence. Camille is starting to read as evil for no real reason. The show keeps telling us she's doing this because Juliet is an existential threat, and that justification has got thinner every week while her actions have got worse. Drugging 10,000 people is not a proportionate response to one woman remembering things. Putting a watch on your husband because he let a suspect slip is not the behavior of someone under genuine pressure. It's the behavior of someone who's decided everyone is against her. There was a version of Camille that made sense, the one the Vault chose, because she had a child and a career and more to lose than anyone else. That woman was frightened and complying. What's on screen now is somebody enjoying it, and the show hasn't shown us the step in between. The most interesting reading available is that the algorithm has been steadily working on her, and this episode supports that, since it's the only presence in her life offering comfort while she pushes everyone else away. If that's the story, it needs to be said more clearly, because right now she's sliding toward villain without the writing to carry her there. Something else stood out, and it's about an absence rather than a scene. Lucas and Juliet still haven't properly talked. These 2 are the only people alive in Silo 18 who have seen what's really out there. Juliet walked to Silo 17 and back. Lucas found the tunnel and spoke to the algorithm directly. Between them, they hold nearly the entire truth, and they've now been in the same room without the show giving them a real conversation about any of it. That has to be deliberate. This series is too careful for that to be an accident, which means it's being saved. And it's being saved while one of them has just been signed up for a mission the algorithm has already decided he won't survive. If they never get that conversation, that's the tragedy the season is building toward. Paul Billings gives Hank the bad news about the light bulbs and then spends the rest of the episode discovering how much people hate him. He tries to ask Mark about Orla Kent and gets torn apart because Mark's friend was thrown to his death by 2 raiders during the rebellion, and Billings showed almost no interest at the time. Now he wants help with a different death, and Mark owes him nothing. Mark does give him a lead though, and it points at Knox, whose father had a reputation as a black market smuggler and once stole supplies himself, spending years in the mines for it. Knox goes to see his father and finds out the man is already dead. So Billings is now walking his investigation straight toward the Resistance, from an angle nobody in the Resistance is watching. There's one thing in this episode that hasn't been resolved and probably matters enormously. Juliet was caught on camera in Supply, at roughly the same time she was somewhere else entirely. She can't be in 2 places at once. Either the footage is fabricated, or somebody is moving through this silo who looks enough like Juliet to be logged as her. Both possibilities are large, and either one connects directly to the missing light bulbs and Orla Kent's murder, since Supply is where all of this started. That's the loose thread I'd watch hardest going into episode 7. Daniel and Helen spend the whole hour in a van that's driving itself, with their phones dead and no way to signal anyone outside. Daniel hurts himself trying to get at the wiring. What comes out in that conversation is more important than the drive. Helen admits she lost a previous job for protecting a Senate source, including fabricating information to do it, and she reveals that Charlotte was one of her sources. Not a stranger she's investigating, someone she already knew. Then she reveals she originally owned the Duck Pez dispenser. That's the same duck that ends up in Silo 18 3 centuries later, that George Wilkins passes to Juliet, that Robert Sims hands back to her in episode 5, and that triggers her memory returning. Think about what that object has actually done. A journalist in Washington owns a piece of plastic. Somehow, it survives the end of the world, gets underground, gets passed down through generations of people hiding the truth, ends up in the hands of a man who dies for what he knows, reaches Juliet, gets taken away from her, and comes back at the exact moment she needs it to remember everything. The show has been careful with this. It's the one physical object connecting both timelines, and it's now been established as belonging to Helen specifically, which means the chain runs from her to Juliet across 300 years. That chain has to start somewhere, and the simplest way for a journalist's Pez dispenser to end up underground is for the journalist to carry it there herself. Helen going into a silo would explain how the object survives, and it would also explain something about the Flame Keepers, the people who spent generations hiding relics and passing down what they knew. Somebody had to be first. Somebody had to walk in already knowing the truth and decide to keep a piece of the old world where the founders couldn't reach it. A journalist who spent her career refusing to let sources be buried is exactly the kind of person who'd do that. Police escort the van the rest of the way. The destination turns out to be an airport hangar with a private plane in it, and Senator Thurman is waiting. She asks them if they want to save the world. The pitch only makes sense once you notice what Daniel is actually good at. His background is architecture and drilling. He knows how to put big structures deep into the ground, which is precisely what building 51 underground shelters requires. She isn't recruiting a congressman for his vote, she's recruiting an engineer for his hands. Helen's value to her is a different thing entirely, because a journalist investigating you is a threat, and a journalist working for you is an asset who's already done the research. Everything that's happened to them this season, the surveillance, the vanished hacker, the blackmail, the hijacked van, now reads less like an attempt to stop them and more like a long audition they didn't know they were in. What Thurman isn't going to explain is what happened to Charlotte's squadron. Daniel is about to be handed the job of building the answer to a threat nobody has told him the truth about. The Drive is the episode where everyone thinks they've won something. Juliet thinks she found a loophole, Camille thinks she's in control, and the algorithm is the only one in that group who actually is. The one thing it did that it never needed to do was hesitate before answering a question and then sound annoyed about being asked. That moment is going to matter. Nothing in this show happens by accident, and the machine doesn't get interrupted.